Hi, welcome everybody to our weekly Zoom, um, our TDA gathering. And today we are really lucky to have Erin Weist here. Erin and I have been friends for a number of years. I've really enjoyed getting to know her and watching her journey. It has been very interesting. And if any of you are tuning into my new project, which I'm calling Shift Series, where we're watching people go through life-changing experiences. What I'm trying to do with it is I'm trying to normalize these experiences. And, I know people who are new to this space sometimes have big ideas of what these experiences look like. And I'm using what I'm saying, ordinary people having extraordinary experiences. Erin was one of the first people that was the first episode that went out. So you can start to see some of her story as she and I go back and forth in that episode. And then there will be a follow-up episode with Erin that I find equally as interesting. If anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, put that in the chat and I'll drop in a link. If you do know what I'm talking about and haven't seen it yet, I'd love for any of you to go and spend a minute looking at that, watching that. I think it's a really good thing for people who are brand new to the space, or for people like if you have extended family who isn't sure what you're doing, or what, they're a little scared of psychedelics. This would be an interesting viewing choice for them to really kind of see what to help normalize it. So that's all to say. Sorry to just promote me. Erin is a big part of that. She's been a dear friend, and she always says yes to anything I ask. So I love her for that. That's probably a fatal flaw on her part. But I was going to make up an introduction, but she's a mother of 5. I'll say that. She's married to her partner, Mike. They've been married for 20 something years, probably. And she really is lovely. She's a bit of a witch, which you will get to learn about, I bet, today. And I'm excited to hear what she has to say. When I said, what do you want to talk about? She said, she sent me the title, Deepening Spirituality Through Our Ancestral Stories. And I can't wait to hear what she has. I have a sense of what she's going to talk about because we have conversations that go back and forth, but I am excited to hear what she has to say. So, Erin, I'm going to stop my audio and video. You can go ahead and share your screen there at the bottom of you can see the little box.
Yeah.
Can you see that? No, there we go. So now you should be able to share. But I'm here. If you have any problems, just ask. Is that allowing you to share?
Yes.
Okay,
Might go back and forth because we're
that's fine.
we're having issues.
Whatever you need to do. And again, if we need to just, turn it into a conversation, I'm happy to do that. So I'm here to jump in for any troubleshooting, but enjoy your time with Erin, and as always, put questions in the chat or into the Q&A. Erin will take about 30 minutes, and then we'll do a few questions there at the end, and we will stop at the top of the hour. All right,
All
Erin,
right.
all yours.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks for having me. And for anybody joining, I am hoping that anything that I share can be useful. Some things that I have found for me that have improved, deepened my spirituality. And so maybe there will be something for someone else. I do have some slides I may share a little bit, but I'm just having phone issues. And so I need to be able to see my notes that are also on my phone because my laptop is not working. So I'm going to start. I'm just going to start with a couple of notes. Actually, I'm going to start with a little bit more intro of myself. I lived as a devout Christian for 40 years, and about 4 years ago decided to change my mind. And so what that looked like is that I needed to redefine my identity, my spirituality, my connection to this life. And so for me, I went through a process of deciding what spirituality meant to me. And at this point where I'm at in my life, it means anything that connects me to myself, to other people, to the earth, really anything in the universe. So anything that connects me to this life is spiritual for me. So, for example, when I found someone invited me to an earth altar experience, which was a group setting of creating this nature mandala and doing it in a very intentional, contemplative way. That struck me as very connecting. And so I added it into my toolbox of list of spiritual practices. And so things like that I've constantly been adding over the last several years. And one of the things that as Sarah said, when she asked about what I could speak about, something that has come up in the last few months for me is connecting to my ancestors. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to see first if I don't even know if I have any slides we're sharing. They were really just so you had something to look at besides my face. But yeah, I mean that you don't, I have a title slide, Deepening Spirituality Through Our Ancestral Stories. I am actually going to share this really quickly. Sorry, my phone is deciding to be very slow. Everything will be shared. Okay, here we go. What can we learn? I'm going to turn this so that there we go, full screen. Is that sharing? I don't know if people want to put that in the chat. I cannot check the chat. I just realized because
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you. Okay, let me go back.
Yeah.
All right. What we can learn is, first of all, these are, again, I'm going to share things that I have learned that have connected me to my spirituality. There may be more. And if you have ideas or things that come to you, I would love anybody who put a little note and anything you wanted to share at the end. So first of all, healing our connection to the past. Many of us have trauma in our own stories, in our ancestors' stories, in our along our family lines. There are deaths, there are wars, there are all kinds of tragedies. And so even healing can, even whole societies, whole communities, whole civilizations, there are traumas in our past. And so learning about our ancestral stories can heal our past. It can also reframe our relationships. I had some negative emotional experiences with my more recent ancestors that I wanted to heal because that was just bringing negative energy into my life. It can help us better understand who we are. This is a big one for me because we're learning more and more and more about epigenetics, and we are learning that wounds and experiences that our ancestors had, even tastes, likes, dislikes, are carried down in our genes. And it's not just hair color and eye color, but we literally carry trauma from the past in our genes. So it can help us better understand who we are and where we've come from. And like I said, spirituality for me is connecting myself to, we're going to switch that back, is connecting to my spirituality is connecting to the universe. So this is something that's helped me connect in some deep ways. So first of all, how do we find our heritage? I'm just going to really briefly mention some of that. There are some sites like ancestry.com that you can sign up and use. There are other free sites that I found, and I'm not sure I have them. Here we go. myheritage.com is one. Family Search is one that is free. anyway, there are lots of places that you can search of sites that will fit your need, that you can search the records that show your ancestors. Maybe you already know, maybe that's something that's been talked about in your family for a long time, and you know, countries where ancestors may have emigrated from. My ancestors on both my maternal and paternal sides have been in this land on this continent for 300 years. So there's a lot of heritage there and places, things that I can learn about from there. But I also have ancestors that go back to Celtic lands, that go back to England, the Channel Islands, places like that. Um, you also might take advantage of people in your family. Maybe you have an annoying aunt or cousin or something that likes to share all this stuff. Go take them to lunch, ask them questions. Maybe you have a family Bible that has births or deaths, things like that, marriages recorded in it. Ask around in your family. That will be your best resource for finding stories and for finding, first of all, to find. We're just looking to go back and find your heritage. Where are your people from? Okay, so then there are a couple things that this led me to in my life, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each of them. The first one that I want to talk about is connecting to, once you find a place, once you find your people, follow a line, right? You could choose from dozens and dozens of them. So choose one that sounds intriguing to you, or that you know a land where they come from, and start learning about it. You're going to learn about some stories they tell. You'll learn about their political history, about their religious history, the gods and goddesses that they worshipped. Um, and all of the stories that they tell as well, which is what I'm going to talk about for a minute. It tells you some of the values that they had. So I have, I'm going to read this really quickly. um I have a story that I'm going to share. I tried to find a really short one, so I apologize if this takes too much time. I'm going to kind of skip over some of it. Um, and read this to you. And of course, when I closed the tab, it skipped down. Here we go. It's called The Horned Women. A rich woman sat up late one night carding and preparing wool. All the family and servants were asleep. Suddenly a knock was at the door, and a voice called, "Open!" "Who is there?" said the woman of the house. "I am the witch of One Horn," she answered. The mistress, supposing one of her neighbors had called and required assistance, opened the door, and a woman entered, having in her hand a pair of wool carders, and bearing a horn on her forehead, as if growing there. She sat down by the fire in silence and began to card the wool with violent haste. Suddenly she paused and said, "Where are the women? They delay too long." Then a second knock came at the door, and a voice called as before, "Open!" The mistress felt herself obliged to rise and open, and immediately a second witch entered, having two horns on her forehead, and in her hand a wheel for spinning wool. "Give me place," she said. "I am the witch of the two horns." And she began to spin as quick as lightning. And so the knocks went on, and the call was heard, and the witches entered, until at last 12 women sat round the fire, the first with one horn, the last with 12. And they carded the thread and turned their spinning wheels and wound and wove, all singing together an ancient rhyme. But no word did they speak to the mistress. Strange and frightful were these 12 women with their horns and their wheels, and the mistress felt near to death. One of them called to her in Irish and said, "Rise, woman, and make us a cake." Then the mistress searched for a vessel, and from the well, that she might feed the meal, mix the meal, and make the cake, but she could find none. They said to her, "Take a sieve and bring water in it." And she took the sieve to the well, but the water poured from it, and she could fetch none for the cake. Then a voice came to her and said, "Take clay and moss and bind them together and plaster the sieve so that it will hold." This she did, and the sieve held the water for the cake. And the voice told again, "Return, and when thou come to the north angle of the house, cry aloud 3 times and say, 'The mountain of the Fenian women and the sky over it is all on fire.'" And she did so. When the witches inside heard the call, a great and terrible cry broke from their lips. They rushed forth with wild lamentation and shrieks and fled away. But the spirit of the well bade the mistress of the house to enter and prepare her home against the enchantments of the witches if they returned. At first, to break their spells, she sprinkled the water in which she had washed her child's feet, the feet water, outside the door on the threshold. Secondly, she took the cake, which in her absence the witches had made, of meal mixed with the blood drawn from her sleeping family, and she broke the cake in bits and placed a bit in the mouth of each sleeper, and they were restored. And she took the cloth they had woven and placed it half in and half out of the chest with a padlock. And lastly, she secured the door with a great crossbeam fastened in the jambs so that the witches could not enter. Not long were the witches in coming back, and they raged and called for vengeance. Open, open, they screamed. Open, feet water. I cannot, said the feet water. I am scattered on the ground, and my path is down in the lough. Open, open, wood and trees and beam, they cried to the door. I cannot, said the door, for the beam is fixed in the jambs, and I have no power to move. Open, open, cake that we have made and mingled with blood, they cried again. I cannot, said the cake, for I am broken and bruised, and my blood is on the lips of the sleeping children. Then the witches rushed through the air with great cries and fled back to Sylvanon, uttering strange curses on the spirit of the well, who had wished their ruin. But the woman of the house was left in peace, and a mantle dropped by one of the witches in her flight was kept hung up by the mistress in memory of that night. This mantle was kept by the same family from generation to generation for 500 years after. So this is where it gets good. When we get to a story, these are stories that I started to discover as I looked to. Part of my line was Celtic heritage. So in this case, I used Spotify, and I did a simple search for Celtic medicine. And what I came across were playlists, as well as podcasts and readings of Celtic medicine stories. And so I started to incorporate some of these things into my own personal spiritual practices, and learn what the stories were trying to tell. This particular story has several themes of magic, of fear, of evil magic, of death, of overcoming death, of listening to an inner voice, and of overcoming um, potential wickedness or things to fear or villains in someone's life with by following the inner voice and with a little bit of cunning. So that tells me quite a few things right away about this my ancestors. It tells me mostly what they valued. So if you have a story that is about bringing peace to a land, you know that that's what that they valued, bringing peace to a land. If they center families, then they've valued families. If they center things like cunning or kindness or bravery, the stories tell us what they valued. In addition, there have been other lines of my family that I've learned about paganism. Potentially, it's a little bit far away, but Druidism and paganism that they potentially practiced. At one point, it led me to learning about this particular area of land in England, where the land, the actual dirt there, is considered sacred, and there's an ancient burial mound with red dirt, and that led me on a search to all kinds of things. I learned about that it's potentially linked to Mary Magdalene, that it's potentially linked to ancient Christianity as well as paganism. And I found a woman on Etsy who lives there and makes little amulets and figurines from the red clay. And so, because of our connected world, I was able to reach out to her and get a piece of this ancestral land that now is part of my kind of my special corner in my room that has my sacred objects that I can use either as for meditating or just for grounding and connecting me to the earth. So I'm curious if you can, for anybody in the chat, if you want to put up anything that you know, do you know where some of your ancestors are from? And you probably have, like I said, there are dozens of lines that you can choose from, and they spread and they spread. But one that's maybe intrigues you, or maybe that's in an area of the land that you would like to learn more about. I'm just curious about people. So I'm going to look at that in a second. But if you as you research this area of the land, there's so much that we can learn about about our own stories and where we come from. We learn about what their festivals were. We can learn about what their practices and their rituals were that kept them grounded and connected to each other and to the earth. We can learn about, again, like I said, their values. What were the things that guided them? Who were the good guys and what values did they possess? And who were the bad guys and what values did they possess? One of the best things that I learned from one of the Celtic medicine stories that I listened to is this particular narrator would remind, every time she told a story, she would say, don't get too hung up in the details. A lot of these are translations anyway. The story that I read was a translation from an Irish story, and she's telling Celtic stories as well. These are translations. And so she said, don't get too caught up in the exact wording of the stories. And if your mind starts to wander, pay attention to what it grabbed onto, and because that is where the medicine is. And so that again has become part of my practices in the songs that I listen to, in the stories that I listen to, paying attention to what my mind grabs onto in the story and where it goes with it. It tells me what I'm looking for, what I might possibly need in my life at that time. Let's see. So yeah, so that was just a reminder to remember that a lot of these stories would have been passed down and memorized, but they would also change over time. It would change through language, they would change through the needs of the people. So remember not to get too caught up in the exactness of the stories. But this basically tells us where we're from. It tells us the wounds and the pain, the joy, the awe that they carried, their preferences, likes, dislikes. And knowing more about these things can let us connect deeply with ourselves. It helps us know where we are from. It helps us know maybe why we have certain likes and dislikes in ourselves. The other thing that I want to talk a little bit about, what connecting to these stories gave me, is when I started researching the archetypes inside these stories. I've kind of been raised, I was an English major in school. And so I was raised to, or, trained through my schooling to pick apart characters and themes and focus on that. And in a lot of my schooling and in a lot of religious study, those themes and characters often revolved around men. And so I found myself wanting to find goddesses. I found myself wanting to find um, people that I could relate to and traits that I could have. And even in terms of stories, I know a lot of the hero types and the archetypes that we have in Western literature, and they're mostly based around the hero's journey around for men. And so I found myself being really intrigued and wondering if, as I searched for female goddesses, if there were also a variety of female archetypes. And I was very pleased to find that there are, especially in this one line of Celtic medicine stories that I was researching. And so I won't go too deeply in them because there are a lot. um, but I'll maybe, let me see. Here we go. But as I read these stories and I was studying archetypes, I learned to bring those into my own meditative practices. And so Sarah and I talked about this as had a recent mushroom journey, and some of these archetypes came up in my mushroom journey because I'd been perusing them, because I'd been incorporating them into reading into my practices, reading about them, talking about them, sharing them with people. I spent a really lovely week sending messages to my friends and telling them which archetype I recognized in them. And it created beautiful dialogue between me and my friends, and kind of letting them know how I saw them, which again, as part of my spirituality, is connecting with other people. So that was a beautiful practice for me. There were the archetypes like the queen, the mother, the maiden, and the one that surprised me that related most to me was the priestess. And so in this mushroom journey, I had this priestess, also showed up as a midwife, but it was the same archetype, and gave me a lot of beautiful inner messages about the kind of person that I wanted to be, and the kind of person that I want to show up as for the people in my life, the people that I love. And so this was all directly related to that one simple Spotify search for Celtic medicine and the stories that I found, and the research I started to do, and the archetypes I subsequently found. Um, and so I started to realize this was a really good part of my practice. And it was, as I said in the beginning, deepening my own personal spirituality. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about that came up with the Celtic medicine and researching on Spotify was Celtic medicine music. I thought I might try and play something, but I don't know if I actually don't think you'll be able to hear it. So I'm gonna skip it. If anybody does, oh, I was gonna go into the chat, sorry. And see, did anybody have a place? No, we don't have any places. Okay. If anyone has Celtic ancestry, I highly recommend going to a music site. I happen to use Spotify, but and looking up Celtic music, or choose your ancestry, what place you're interested in, and look up your music from that place. Oh, Urquharts come from Scotland. That's right. I did know that. We've got Urquhart Castle up there in Scotland. And I found some beautiful Scottish. I actually have a Scottish song that I was going to play. I'll send it to you, Sarah. 'Cause I don't think it'll work when I'm on my phone and I need to play it from the phone. But it's a Scottish song that I'm not even going to remotely try and translate or pronounce the name of. But it translates as the county that it was from, Mackay County, which is part of the Northern Highlands. Um, anyway, it's a song. It's a very sad, mournful song. So we have long, drawn out bagpipes underneath, and a lone female voice singing in a minor key, and it's beautiful. And it was sung by farm tenants who lived in the 18th, 19th centuries, and they were kicked out of their homes to make way for larger sheep farms. And so there's obviously history in there, there's politics in there, there's economics in there. And at the heart of it all, there are people who express their pain through music. The other thing I will mention, and the other cool experience I had, was again on this recent mushroom journey. I used the Celtic medicine music playlist as the background of my journey. And for those of you who have done a journey, um, you might know that music can greatly affect anything in your space can greatly affect your journey. But music can actually become a guide and direct the way that your journey goes, which was the case for me. So I thought I'll share a couple experiences I had. One was a song that came on that I didn't expect. It didn't sound, there was a rhythmic drumming at the back. And it started with a lone voice, and it sounded almost Native American to me. And I didn't really know what to think. And then a second, that was a female voice. And then a second female voice joined in harmony. And in the space that I was in, it connected me so deeply to my own tendencies, which are driven to the space of harmony, creating harmony. I'm a singer. I'm a musician. I played piano. I'm a musician, and so creating harmony is a huge, huge part of it. Fills me. It lights me up. Right. So I hear these two female voices singing in harmony, and immediately it would be hard to describe because again, mushroom journeys are hard to describe. But I felt an immediate connection and sense of belonging. And that is a hard feeling to duplicate. And it's hard to describe, but I immediately felt grounded and connected to that whoever was singing it and wherever it came from. And I felt a deep, deep sense of belonging. And that's a feeling that's not going to fade anytime soon. Anytime I hear that song come up again, so obviously I've saved that playlist. Um, Anytime I hear it come up again, I'm immediately back into that feeling and a big smile. I mean, the first time that happened and it played, I was just sobbing tears of joy. And so now it puts a big smile on my face and immediately lends to me that feeling of belonging. Um, and that's a pretty rare thing, and it's pretty priceless as far as I'm concerned. So that's a deep way that that it's helped me deepen my spirituality. Um, the other, probably less specific, but just the music constantly in this journey kept drawing me back. It would draw me back to the land. It would draw me back. The lyrics, as you know, lyrics in mushroom journeys in songs can also guide and direct a path. And so this, again, because it was a foreign language from my ancestors, and it was about foreign stories. Some of them are in English, but it was music that I can connect to. It kept further cementing and connecting me and regrounding me in my mushroom journey, which was a remarkably safe feeling. So again, if that's something you haven't done, I might recommend looking at finding a playlist of some kind from your ancestry. Where did they come from? What instruments did they play? It affects the beats that they had, which affected the dances they did, which affected how they moved. Those are the places that you came from. And this was one of the slides that I had from Carl Jung. He said, the soul of humanity is like an ancient tree whose roots stretch far into the past. And if you know anything about Jung, it's a lot about creating the recognizing the individual and healing the individual from within. And he taught regularly that came from knowing about the past, knowing not only yourself and your own past, but the past of your people. That I think another quote he had was that the history is not written in thick books, but in our very blood. And and that is true in our own personal experiences. Where we've come from and who we are is largely determined by the people that came before us, where they lived, what they ate, um, and how they celebrated. So the last thing I want to share is about celebrations and how that a way that I looked for spirituality in my life is I started learning. I wasn't really down with rituals at first. It seemed a little bit too dogmatic to me when I was first trying to find my own spirituality and create my own spiritual identity. But I read a book called The Awakened Brain by Lisa Miller. She's a neuroscientist. And she really, her research was all about how spirituality is healthier for us and it benefits us. And one of the things she talked about often was rituals, that rituals ground people together. They ground communities together as well, especially. So I do not have communal rituals, uh, many at this time. I actually do have a few. But one of the things, because I read about this, and I wanted to have a healthy spirituality, I started looking for rituals, personal ones that I could have in my own life. And so again, like I mentioned about the little totem that I got, things like this that I can make a part of my practices. The earth altars that I mentioned before are something that I've done and created, and spent some time also researching how my certain areas and certain lands practice this, because it's a common practice throughout the world, maybe looks a little bit different. But that's something that I've used in doing the earth altars. I also have a ritual that I learned about, pouring out the first cup of coffee onto the land. I learned about, I'm trying to remember any others. I can't remember off the top of my head. But the rituals connecting me to the people that came before me. The solstice and equinox, of course. One of the Channel Islands where I have ancestors, I did not actually realize that had been inhabited since, I think it was like 6th century CE. And originally there were druids there, and there is an ancient building that they've uncovered in the 70s that is a burial mound, but with a long passageway. And the passageway was built, they discovered, was built directly so that on the equinoxes, both the spring and the fall, the sun would shine directly down this passageway from front to back or back to front. And and so that was something I discovered and recognized that my potential, whenever, I don't know if my ancestors lived there that long ago, but at some point they were in this land they were celebrating the equinoxes. And so having rituals on the equinoxes and the solstices became one of my rituals. um and the other was the moon, and finding ways that different people in my ancestry, how they celebrated the harvest seasons and the moons. All of these things have essentially done exactly what I set out to do, was to deepen my connection with myself, deepen that connection with others, with where I've come from, and deepen my connection with the earth. And so that has become my spirituality. So I think where I finally landed is that the people where we came from essentially have dictated where we are, right? If you had ancestors or even recent, in grandparents that moved from one state to another and landed you where you are, we physically know that was your ancestors got you there, right? um but thinking about spirituality, the spiritual practices that they had also got you where you are, whether physically, emotionally, and in your own spirituality. So learning about who they are, and what they did and how they lived, empowers you to know who you are and where you've come from, and what's inside you, and gives us a chance to choose, what do we keep, what do we discard, what is helpful and what is not. And so learning about my some of my ancestral stories and who they are and how they practiced has helped empower me to decide, what can I do to practice, what can I do to connect myself to my people and my land and to myself. Um so that is kind of my that is my presentation, I think. Oh,
I love it.
now we've got some people commenting about, I also have family all the way back to the Mayflower, so maybe we're related, or maybe we were neighbors at one.
Well, yeah. So many of us post-Mormons have those connections.
Right.
But Erin, so part of what I want to ask is, like, you're connecting back to your ancestral home or homes. Does it matter to you whether someone in your line was a literal, was literally at that site, or does it just matter that those were things that were important to people in the area that, where you come from?
That's a good question. I actually have done both. So I've tried to find very specific regions because, um, especially before there was a lot of extensive travel, different regions could be wildly different from each other in their food and their customs and in everything. But in general, like the story about the long passageway in the Channel Islands, what really is I feel is that how people have been on that land that came before, whether it was directly, my ancestors were there at some point. Maybe they were there 700 or 800 years later. But I still feel a connection to this land here and reverence for the people that were here before me, before any of us, before colonizing happened. So I feel like it's important to learn really an area or land. It doesn't always have to be your own ancestors, but how the land was cultivated and treated and respected. But I think that's a great question. I don't know if anybody else has had any other experiences.
No, and I love the other thing, Erin, that really intrigues me with what you're doing is that you're trying to be so thoughtful to replace spirituality and worship, and trying to reinvent what that looks like, right? That's a huge part of what TDA is everybody has their own path, and everybody has their own autonomy, related to religion, related to worship. And it would be difficult for anyone to argue that this is not real worship to you.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sure lots of people could think whatever they want about it,
They can
but
think whatever they want, but
right. But it absolutely feels like worship to me. And part of the importance of being like worship is for me is to not have it be dogmatic and not be very strict about it and so yeah, that makes it even less legitimate sounding.
maybe less legitimate sounding because we're so used to these patriarchal, top down Abrahamic religions. But we know from many of us from experience that those can be very dangerous places for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it might not look the same as everything. And I'm going to use a word, mystic. Steve started saying we're mystics, in TDA. And I was like, No, not everyone." Because I was thinking, I thought I knew the definition of that. But the true definition, or one of the main definitions, original definitions, is mystics are people who seek their own worship. And so, in that sense, we absolutely are. We are a mystic religion because each one of us, your worship looks very different than mine, but
Right.
they're both very legitimate, right? Um, and so I think that's interesting. Are there any questions from the group? Um, I
Yeah, or if
was
anybody even has like something as an ancestral story that they've connected to in their spirituality, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, and I love Coral saying she doesn't like the dogmatic life. Jennifer saying it feels more legitimate to her. I agree. And that's what is fun in this space is we can be curious. In my, when I was, and I'll just say I was a Mormon, and if someone didn't agree with me, including I have aunts and uncles. My father was a convert into Mormonism, and so my aunt, his siblings, I just thought they were all evil. I couldn't be curious about who they were or what they were experiencing in spirituality. But I love with this, I can be super open to Erin and her stories, and none of that impacts me negatively. If so I it's either going to be neutral, or it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be interesting to me, and it might change a little bit of the way I think and the way I do things. So to me, this just opens up so many more possibilities, in worship.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's part of the non-dogmatic part, is that creating loosely holding things and being able to choose has opened up the opportunity for curiosity, like you said. Um, and it also has deepened my connection to some of these rituals or practices or thoughts in ways that it was never possible with something that was handed to me, that I did, catechistically. But now it is actually something that is deeply moving and feels very, very personal. That feels like something that I've owned and created.
So for anyone who's been to our spring equinox the last few years, I think all 3 years, Erin has guided an earth altar where people bring out rocks and fruit and flowers and bones and wood, and we've just created these massive earth altars. I've been with her in Mexico where we did a version of the same thing, and it's always beautiful, it's always different. And I just find those really fascinating and a really interesting way to interact with earthly elements.
Yeah, and that's also a good example of one that is community connecting, because when a group creates it together, it becomes this synergistic thing where you have a different thing than if everybody had done their own individually. You have a group, you have the group think. And so it does feel everyone's very it always feels really lovely and connecting to do it with people and recognize that you created together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's lovely. Well, Erin, I just think I have really enjoyed as a friend watching you develop this spiritual practice. I've watched, you change your worship and what that looks like. I just love, not everyone loves this term, but I'm just embracing for women the concept of being a witch. The witches were the ones that were smart, they were outspoken, they were healers, they were community builders, and they were threats to the patriarchy. So I'm like, oh,
Truth
by
teller.
all accounts, I'm a witch. And most of the women in my life absolutely are. So,
Same.
I actually saw it. If anyone, you guys, you should go see this movie. This is a tangent, but it's called Weapons, and there might be some witchy themes in there. It's really fascinating. It's one of the smartest films I've seen in a long time. So lots of layers, and relates a little bit to this. You're all gonna go see it and go, what? But to me it does. I made some connections. Whether it connects to this or not, you should go see this movie if you like horror, and if you like, you're okay with a little.
Oh, you should have clarified that at first.
Yeah, yeah. It's a horror film. There's no question, but so smart. Okay.
Hmm.
That was a tangent. I didn't mean to end on that. So, but thank you, Erin, for being here. Thank you for sharing these experiences with us. Um, and thank you for participating. Everybody else, thank you for being here. And I love that I keep seeing a lot of these same names over and over every week, that you're participating with us. If there's something you guys want to hear, I'd love to see that in the chat. No promises, but we are chatting again with Paul Stamets reached out to us recently, and I'm hoping that maybe we can grab him for one of these Wednesday nights. So for sure, keep watching. And whether or not he comes, we are enjoying this lineup. And if there is something specific you guys want to hear about, put it in here, put it in the chat this week or another week, and let us know, and I'll see what I can do on that. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye, all.